The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is Andre Mayette. I'm your host. Big thanks to Ukla the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to the show. This week's guest is Jeff Blyth, a director. It's hard to list every single thing he's done. It's been a lot of jobs, as he mentions in our conversation. He's been key grips, he's been animator, he's been everything you could pretty much do in the film industry. He's done it with a very impressive career when it comes to aerial photography, when it comes to straight up regular directing, when it comes to everything really. Very impressive guy. Very happy to have had a chance to speak with him. I don't want to go too deep in all the things he's done, obviously, since we were going to talk about that in the episode. However, you'd be amazed at some of the things he's had a hand in and some of the people he's got to work with, mostly through his work with Disney. If you were a fan of the old school Disney films, may have watched them on The Wonderful World of Disney as I did growing up, then you may recognize a film called Cheetah, which is about a family from the States who moves to Africa for a small period of time, in which they adopt a baby orphaned cheetah and raise it unto adulthood and then get into some adventures with it. I don't want to give too much away in case you plan on watching it, but it is a fun, delightful little family film. Just kind of heartwarming fare. That's something I think the world is missing a little bit, and that's something we do talk about as well in the episode. So I'm very excited to talk with him about that. But in recent news in my life, I know last time when I had my interview with Jason Liu, I mentioned that we had lost our dear cat Presley that day. So a couple weeks have gone by, and we're doing good. My wife's still very upset, as much as she's getting through it quite all right. And I too am also, but I feel like society kind of puts this pressure on guys to push your feelings deep down and don't talk about them. And I'm not afraid to talk about my feelings or anything like that. I just kind of feel like there's almost like a weight that comes with grief that sort of sits within you, that it almost feels like crying is a catharsis to get rid of it. And I don't feel like that comes as easily to me as it used to when I was younger. I don't know if it's just getting jaded from the world or if it's from societal pressure. I don't know if that's it, but in the end, I'm finding it tough to find a release for that. I'm not like blowing up or, internalizing it into some kind of anger or cancer or whatever. I'm mostly just kind of still sadness on the fringes. She did have a long life. She was 18 years old. And whenever you say it to somebody, they're kind of like, wow, I can't believe that your cat was that old. But, it's still hard and sad when she's gone. We received her ashes. So, there's obviously a little bit of mourning with that, and she's back in the home now, so that's interesting. But, life pretty much goes on, as it always has, and always does. All you can really ask is for a good life. We all have an expiry date, so you hope that before you reach it, you have a good one, and you're treated well, and Presley certainly did, and I hope that's the case with everybody listening, everybody in the world. I hope we're all doing well. The holiday season is upon us. If you're listening to this the day it airs, that would be on Friday, December 16th. Our next episode, of course, being December 30th, which will be after the holidays. So this is our last episode before Christmas. And I think I've mentioned this on the show before. Christmas is one of my favorite holidays. Halloween and Christmas are kind of neck and neck. I do love me a good horror movie, so Halloween obviously falls into that world. But there's some with Christmas, and it's not the religious side of it, because anyone who knows me or has listened to the show knows that I'm pretty far removed from that. It's mostly just the feeling in the air, that there's kind of a better, warmer feeling kind of amongst the people that you see out in the world. I'm not saying with everybody. There are obviously people that don't like the holidays, but there is kind of almost like a community societal sort of warming that comes with the holidays. Where I don't know if it's just the threat, of of having to see family members, of spending more time with coworkers, family, Christmas parties, all that sort of thing. But it does seem like everybody seems a little nicer and a little warmer. I like the tradition of it all, the trees and the lights, and even the gift giving. I love buying gifts for people. It makes me happy. So all that stuff I really love. So I am enjoying the season. It's it's now starting to feel like it with the weather here in Nova Scotia, but otherwise I am happy to see Christmas come, spend time with the family, with my wife, just hang out and watch some movies, probably drink a little too much eggnog and alcohol, and just relax, which is something I feel as though I could really use. It's been a long year. I'm not saying it was a bad one, just a long one. And mental health wise, I feel like a lot of pressure lately, and things have gotten to me a little. And I think it's probably just sleep and stress with the cat and all that stuff. So I feel like a little bit of time off over the holidays, which is in the cards, is going to be well needed. So, but enough about me. You guys don't care about me. You want to talk about Jeff Blyth, our guest. A great conversation. And I got to thank my friend Kyle for putting in the recommendation that I talked to Jeff. He had rubbed elbows with Jeff a while ago for a film project, Kyle Ellsworth, and thankfully he had said that he thought he'd be someone interesting for me to talk to in the show. So I looked him up, and he's very receptive, and man, what a great conversation. I got to say, this is probably one of my favorites. I know every once in a while I'll bring up one that I feel like I connected well with the person I was interviewing, and we got some good insight into what makes them tick, into their process, into their work. And I feel like I had that with Jeff. I really enjoyed it. I feel like there's maybe a kindredness there, a spirit of sorts. And it seems like we align a lot of things, but his experiences with filmmaking and the projects he's done with Disney and everything else are astounding. And it's a great conversation. So I look forward to you hearing it. And why wait any longer? So here it is, my conversation with director, filmmaker, Jeff Blyth.
Oh, well, cool.
Yeah, so thought we'd just do a quick little chat about, your life up to this point, if that works for you.
That's the only part I can talk about is up to this point.
Oh, good. Well, where did you begin? Where were you born?
I was born in Ottawa.
Really?
Yeah. I was lived in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Chatham. Eventually, with my father's work, brought us to the States. Mm-hmm. So, but I was about 10 years old when I came across the border. And I've been making films since I was about 13 or 14 years old.
And what was the impetus for that? Like, what was your first, where did you decide to start making films?
My dad was big into films. He had a 16 millimeter camera, and he would take home movies. It's very much like the Fabelmans, the Spielberg movie. If you've seen it yet, or if you do, it's like, wait a minute, that's my story.
Really?
Just minus the ugly divorce.
I haven't got a chance to see it yet. I'm in Nova Scotia, and I don't know if it's hit the major theaters here yet, because I've been looking forward to it, but I haven't seen it listed in any of the theaters locally.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much my story. Starting with the 8 millimeter and, wrangling the family members into making little films, and that continued through high school and into college. And, and even when I was taking film classes at the university, I was always making little films for myself. And part of it was, I always kind of felt like there was so much more that I wanted to explore than what they were showing me in a class. And so I would take additional, I would just take the time to learn other things on my own. Like I took an animation class that they didn't offer at the university. I found this film professor that I really respected, and we put together an individual projects course. where, he and I sat down and we said, okay, here's what this course is going to be. And I was going to explore 4 different kinds of animation, and we set out the criteria for what I would do to pass the course. And so that was a very interesting experience, to be able to work on my own, but to expand my own knowledge, because like I said, it just wasn't offered at the university at that time.
Was animation a passion of yours, like growing up as well, besides from just filmmaking? Like, were you following what was happening in that arena? I know at this time period it probably wasn't as robust as it became, but I'd assume
not really. It
No?
wasn't like there was something that spoke to me in about animation that live action didn't have. I guess if somebody had asked me, I would have just said, oh, no, I'm a live action filmmaker. But I was interested in the process. I was interested in all of the elements of making film. And over the years, I think I've done every job that you can do on a film set. The only one that I haven't done is music. But everything else, I've been a grip and a gaffer and I've shot, I've edited, I've basically done all those different things, because I tended to think of myself as a filmmaker or a storyteller, and what I didn't know, I would learn.
Yeah, you gave yourself all the tools you needed to tell whatever story you needed to tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I noticed that in the film that the recent one that you had made. Is that like freely available to share? Is that like, just because I was going to share it, but I wasn't sure if it was just something you'd sent me a link for, if it was something that.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay, I'll definitely share it on our thing. It's very interesting, and obviously very personal story to you about your father, and his connection with the war and his time in a prison camp.
Well, and it's sort of interesting. I think in a way that it kind of summarizes a lot of the skills that I have as a filmmaker. Because I was doing it myself. I had to do the create the 3-dimension, the 3D models, the CG.
I was going to ask
and
that
stuff
you had
like
done
that.
that as well. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
So it's like,
impressive.
well, it's a one-man show these days. So I've semi-retired, and the job offers are not coming in. So it's make my own work and find my own projects. So they're going to be very passionate kinds of projects, things that I really want to work on. But I'm basically having to do it myself, which calls on all of those skills that over the years I've been been accumulating.
Well, I was going to ask, because that film only came out not too long ago, right? The one that you had shown me, the Nothing Has Been Forgotten.
Right.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, you asked what?
Oh, that's fairly recent that you put that film out, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that footage you must have been compiling for years, I assume.
20 years.
Wow. Because some of it you could tell based on the type of filming, when it was sort of filmed timeline wise, and also what was happening within the story itself.
Oh, it's a real it's a real melting pot of a lot of different footage from a lot of different sources, and trying to find ways to put things at in their best possible format. A lot of the footage of my father and his crew when they were interviewed, which I think was in Toronto, where that came from. Mm-hmm. The TV station that had done that gave me a copy of it, but it was VHS. And these days, which was fine for back in the early 90s when they did that, but to make best use of that material for the film, I reduced the image to a small portion of the screen. Mm-hmm. So that I never had to use it full screen, where you would have, really seen how dreadful the VHS material was. But by doing that, it's just these little commentaries from the 4 of them that work, I think, within the context, because we're focusing on what they're talking about rather than just being a talking head.
Absolutely. I found it interesting as well as refreshing. I mean, just for the uninitiated, Jeff had made a film about his father and his the Cradle Crew, which was the Air Force team he was with back in the war that were taken in as a prisoner of war camp after their plane went down. And it's very interesting. What I found the most about is when you read these stories, obviously there's a sensationalism given to the amount of pain and anguish that goes through all of that happens at that point when you're taking in. But I really like to focus on the camaraderie and the seem like the family almost dynamic that seemed to join all of them together through that experience, and how they almost, instead of dwelling on the pain of it, they seem to just find a brotherhood that they really like nurtured and kept going through their whole lives, it seems, which is very interesting.
Absolutely, you hit it exactly, because and that was the focus of this particular film, was to try to capture some of that, long after they're all gone. But it was the kind of thing that when my father would talk about the war, it was about that element of it rather than the war itself.
Really?
It was.
He didn't seem tortured or haunted by it so much as focused on the parts that lighten his life a bit.
Yeah. I mean, here's a little example of something that was not in the movie, not in his book, but it was they had their song. I don't know what the song was, but something from that era that was kind of like their song. And when they were captured and taken to this Gulag Luft, which was an interrogation center, and they were kept in separate cells, and they didn't know who made it to the ground. They didn't know who was still alive. They didn't know who had been tortured or anything. But what they would do is late at night, my dad would start the song, and he'd start singing, and then he would stop. And then the next guy down the hall in another cell would pick up the song, and he would sing a little bit more of it. And then another guy would pick up the song, and then he would. And so through that, he was able to figure out, oh, okay, everybody made it. They're all still here.
Oh, wow. That's really amazing. The other thing I thought was very interesting was the amount of respect that particular German guard whoever is in charge, showed towards airmen. Like, he had a deep respect kind of for the job of airmen, and treated them better than other regular spies, which are generally just like the bottom of the total, like the worst of the worst, according to him. And yes, was like, and he hoped that through his treatment of the airmen of the enemy side, that the enemy would also be treating their airmen well as well, because he had such a deep respect for them, which I thought was very interesting. People forget in times of war that they're just people. It's not just black and white. There's people within that bring their own things to the table, and I love these very human stories that show that, instead of just painting everyone as monsters or
it's like the scene in the film where my dad sits down with a Luftwaffe pilot
I like
in
that
a little cafe, and it was it took them 20 seconds to and it was all pilot to pilot, and sharing logbooks, sharing stories and stuff. I mean, it was, forget the war, forget that part of it. It was there was a camaraderie.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of heart in it, obviously the source material being so close to yourself, but just humanizing that experience in those people. And obviously the scene where you see him flying again for the first time in 50 years was also very touching as well. So that the heart bleeds through. And I mentioned just when we were starting that I'd watched one of your older films as well, but we can get into that a little later. But one thing I noticed through that is a lot of heart as well, which I feel like may be a continuing theme in some of the work you do.
Well, I don't know if it's a theme that, like themes we tend to think of as well, I think my next film, the theme is going to be, it's like, I don't know. It's just me. It's just the things that appeal to me. And then the choices that you make as a filmmaker, sometimes it comes out a certain way. And I don't really have a dark side. I'm not drawn to dark material so much. And if I am, I find the light somewhere in there as well,
Well, I find that refreshing, because I'm a big film guy. I watch pretty much everything. And a lot of people conflate darkness with being more interesting, and it can be, but only if people doing light stuff aren't doing it well. So there's it's a real two-sided coin, and I think that modern cinema and television could use a little more light. So I really appreciate that. So I assume your father was supportive of going into a career in film, since he was kind of nurturing it along the way.
Well, we kind of reached a compromise.
Oh,
In
you
my in high school, I was looking at what I was going to be doing. I very much wanted to go into film and television, and my dad said, you really need something to fall back on. And so I had to make a case for him that that there was it's a really wide field, film and television, and that what we tend to think of as the people who are successful in film, it's like this pyramid, and these are the people at the very top, but you can have a wonderful career anywhere on that pyramid. And maybe down at the bottom it's people making local TV commercials or whatever, or sales film, training films, educational films, medical films, whatever. And I've done all of those things, and so you don't have to be at the pinnacle of the pyramid to have a successful career. You can be quite successful and at various other levels in there, and that seemed to give him the impetus to say, okay, I will pay for your college education. And
you gotta hit him with the logic. The military man needs at least an explanation, I suppose. Some kind of a path to. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and that is exactly how it worked out. I started very small, working for. Well, when I came out of college after I had made a number of films in college, I went.
Sorry to stop you. What type of films would those have been? Like, what was your focus on for those sort of movies?
What, in college?
Yes.
Well, there were the films that I was making for myself, which were quite often little films that had special effects and visual effects in them, and this was very, very primitive in those days. Because when I went to college, there was one computer on the campus.
Size of a room, right?
No, the size of a building.
Okay.
And you talk to it through punch cards.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that was not part of my education, although I did get to play with that computer a little bit. I had a roommate who was a college computer science major, and he showed me quite a bit about, I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by Fortran, the language that you would use to speak to this computer.
Wow.
And anyway, back in those days, it was I was more interested in using it to meet girls than I was to make films or anything. But
amazing how full circle that became with the internet and the computer world. That seems to be a big focus of it now.
Exactly. But the kinds of films we were making in school were things like, again, back in these days, there was nothing digital. It was all film. We would have an assignment where we'd get a camera and 100 feet of film, which is a couple of minutes of 16 millimeter film. And we'd have to make a movie, a complete story with just 100 feet of film. You could do anything you wanted, but you'd have to go out and figure out every shot, what you were going to do, and execute that. And you no more extra film afterwards. You had to make it fit within that 100 feet, which was quite a good challenge, because that just teaches you to be very precise in what you want and how you're going to go out and get it.
That's
as opposed to somebody saying, "Here's 1,000 feet of film. Go make a 100-foot movie."
Yeah, that's the skill that's very interesting, because and you're right about that, because you look at like that constraint isn't something that's any kind of an issue today. I mean, mostly everything's shot digitally, and the only people that seem to do it on film are just the folks that want to say they did it on film. But the idea that, like, these masterpieces that Hitchcock or these people make, it's like you look at these things, like, when I can't remember the name of the film, but the one he did that had like a 20-minute continuous shot, like what you have to do.
Rope.
Pardon?
Rope.
Yes, that's right. It's the first of Rope. I get it mixed up with Lady Vanishes sometimes. But yes, so like the level of meticulous work that needs to go into making that work when you have a limited amount of film to get that done. And this isn't like, it's not like VHS, you can't spool it through and record over it if it doesn't work. Like it's done. So you have to make it work the first time. And I'm always impressed with that level of old school filmmaking.
Well, I have found that throughout my whole career, I mean, there have been times when I've had millions of dollars for a budget for a Disney theme park film, where we had $19 million as a budget, which is a huge amount of money for a 14-minute film. But what I found is that part of the creative process requires constraints. Even somebody like James Cameron has constraints on him. You'd think his budgets are unlimited. You'd think his time is unlimited and everything, but there really are constraints, physical constraints, financial constraints, creative constraints. And it is through that pressure that we become more creative, that you have to find a way to do that. And some of the pieces that you think you're going to need for that, they're not available. It's like, how do you do that now? And I'll give you an example of that. I was working on a TV show. I was a kids TV series for Nickelodeon.
That's the Secret
show
World
is
of Alex
called
Mack.
Secret World of Alex Mack, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you do a show with kids, you're constantly constrained by the fact that they have to go to school 4 hours a day. So in the middle of your workday, you're going to lose the kids that you're making the show about. They go away. They got to go into class, and that is very, very strict. I mean, it's like a stopwatch. Into class, boom, start the clock.
Also, aren't there constraints on how much they can work in a run of a day too? Like they work less schedule than an adult would. That's
correct.
Yeah.
So in a TV show like that, you've typically got an A story, a B story, a C story, and so you can move around and say, okay, well, I've lost my main characters for a while. I'm going to have to work around them. And so when we would work on a show like that, I would prep for a week. And probably 3 or 4 days of that prep would be massaging the schedule, trying to figure out how do we fit those blocks into the stuff that we need to get, but knowing that they're going to, at this point, they're gone, they're into a classroom. And so you get quite creative in trying to find ways to do that. And I remember one show I was working on, one of the episodes I was working on, where I had worked out my week. It was going, the way it was supposed to go. We were cooking. We were getting all the stuff we were done. But I had planned on being able to shoot until 5 o'clock. And one of the producers came down to the stage and said, "Oh, I forgot to mention.
Oh no.
The star has to go away today. She's got to go do some promo work for Nickelodeon. She's leaving at 4:15. And it was like, but I was counting on her till 5 o'clock and was like, no. I remember the expression he used. He said, at 4:15, she's tail lights, meaning she's in the van, she's driving away at 4:15 because she's got to be there for Nickelodeon. And it was a huge obstacle that just hit me right then and there. And it was like, I've still got a major scene to film with her. It was in a school hallway set that we had. And there were probably 30 extras, and she's got 2 of her friends. and it's a long dialogue scene. I mean, it's like a page of scene that had to be shot, and it was going to be done in 3 or 4 pieces, and I have to now do this all in 15 minutes. It was just like, you're kidding me. Okay. And I remember gathering around the crew and the cast and said, okay, we weren't counting on this. We've only got 15 minutes. And they're all looking at me. I'm the director. I've mapped all this stuff out for, I had done a dozen of these episodes. Excuse me. And all these people are looking at me going, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And I said, all right, here's the plan. And at that moment in my brain, there was no plan. I had no idea. and I followed that up immediately with, okay, here we go. You're going to be here. You're going to be here. You stand here. Camera's here. You're going to deliver this line. Then you're going to turn and start to walk away. She's going to follow. The camera comes with, and just made it up on the spot. And we got it. And, at 4:15, she drove away. But the point is, that's the kind of pressure that, regardless of what scale of project you're working on, that's what creates those moments of intense creativity, where you just have to come up with it.
That's something people don't understand. Like I'm an actor, nothing huge, a lot of stage work, but I am in the union, the actor of the Canadian Union, have been on some film sets and a movie and background and a lot of other little things here and there. But people don't realize how, like, people think you get all the time in the world and it's this big sprawling thing, and like you see the time constraint these people under to get, like, there's a show that they're filming here that they're struggling to get finished before they're done for winter when it's over. So like there's all these like late nights and all the stuff they're cramming in to get everything in, but it's not an unlimited amount of time. They have to get things in by a certain time to meet their budgets, to meet the constraints, to meet the producers and all that stuff, what their needs are. So it's an insane, the amount of moving pieces that are involved in filming, and people don't understand how much work the director has on top of just saying action cut. Like there's a whole other world, like spending days on just coordinating that is insane, but that's what it takes, and that's what you need to do.
Well, and you need a good staff that that will that's flexible, that understands the changes that are coming, and I've over the years I had accumulated some people that I trusted and who understood how I like to work, and so the director has a team, and but like I said, even when you have lots of money and lots of time, there are still other kinds of constraints, other things that you are focusing on that are these limits that are on you. I did a lot of films for Disney theme parks in circle vision, which is a 360-degree process, 9 cameras, 35 millimeter cameras.
So how did that come about? I guess was what I wanted to get into. So when you got into film school, I noticed like those are pretty early on your filmography. So like, how did you land that so quickly out of film school?
Well, I worked in Michigan, where I'd gone to school for a number of years, and then came out to Hollywood, and I had no job prospects at all. I had a couple of leads of go see this guy, go see that guy, and I landed a film job pretty quickly with a company in Laguna Beach, California, which is this was a company that had made their mark as a surf film. Surfers all knew this company because they made surf movies. But they were starting to get into other things, doing second unit for features and documentaries and stuff like this. And we did a film, an IMAX film. It was their first IMAX movie called To Fly, which was the premiere film for the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. And that was I was hired for that film, but stayed and worked with them for a number of years, and we did, oh God, a ton of stuff, and including well, one of the partners in the company was very well known. He was probably one of the best helicopter pilots or cameramen in the world, and he died in a helicopter crash.
Oh wow.
And we shut down for 6 months, couldn't work, just didn't want to work. And the first job that came along required helicopter photography. And I stuck my hand up and said, I'll give it a try. It was for a Ford Thunderbird TV commercial.
Okay.
And so I did that. I was scared to death, but did that. It worked out. And then ended up doing a lot of helicopter photography and second unit photography for this company. And then I did all the helicopter shots for The Shining.
Yeah. I'm obviously like any film fan and horror fan like myself. That's horror royalty. So that's amazing. You got to work on that.
Yeah.
I think I saw an interview with you, and I didn't want to ask you about it because I know you've addressed it before about because there's like that sort of infamous shot where you can see the shadow of the helicopter coming along the bottom that people always think it's some kind of Kubrickism, or like they made that documentary where they're talking about all the secret things that he hid inside the Shining. And I remember you were I think a comment you said was just like he just liked the shot. I don't think he cared there's a shadow in it, which I thought was a very refreshing, because everybody like mythologizes Kubrick as being this mad genius, which he was, it seems. But like everything meant something. The color of the guy's shoelaces meant something. I feel, and I love that's permeated, but I feel sometimes it's hard to forget he was just a filmmaker trying to make a good film sometimes,
If you were to watch the movie Lolita,
mm-hmm.
one of his early works.
Yes, very good movie.
There's a scene when they first come to this house, and there's a dissolve from the outside of the house to the inside of the house. And in the middle of the dissolve, you can actually see Kubrick walking off set. And it's like, I don't think he intended that. It's almost ghost-like. You have to watch for it and back up the film and it's sort of like, yeah, he did that. But he didn't care at that point. It's like, it wasn't this intentionality that everybody has to everything that he does.
Yeah.
And the worst story I'd heard was that supposedly Kubrick was directing the helicopter shots by radio, and he had maps in front of him of Glacier National Park and was directing us, telling us what to shoot and where.
Oh.
There was nothing.
No.
We had no contact, other than we'd send the dailies back to England, mm-hmm. and I was making up shots up in the air. This looks like a great shot, and I'd talk to the guy in the Volkswagen, and we'd line up shots and we'd try things.
Wow.
That's all it was.
Was this direction just go get a shot of this going along the park and that's it? Is that all you want? Did he just tell you that's all I want and that's all you did?
That's it. That's all he asked for.
Wow.
And to me, the best compliment we got out of all of that whole thing was when we were up in Glacier National Park for a month, and we were shooting the helicopter stuff. That was me in the helicopter. But we were also shooting ground shots of the Volkswagen.
Okay.
And the idea was there are 2 trips that the Volkswagen makes. One with Jack Nicholson going up for the interview. There's a second trip where he comes up with his family. And so all of the shots of the ground that we did, the Volkswagen has a trailer behind it with all of their luggage. Mm-hmm. It's this little, 2-wheel trailer with a canvas thing over it, And so we shot, several days of material, pass-bys and whatever of this thing. But all of that was shot from the ground. Kubrick had said, we'll do the first one from the air. We'll do the second trip from the ground. Mm-hmm. So we shot all that stuff, sent it off to England. Didn't know until, the movie came out to find out what it was that he was going to use. Uh-huh. And so what happens is the second trip, he used more of the helicopter shots, and there's no trailer. It was like he totally jettisoned the whole idea of a trailer. So what that means is he was willing to put in the helicopter shots, even though it means when Nicholson and his family show up at the hotel, they've got all this luggage
Yeah.
that would never have fit in a Volkswagen. And so it's like nobody ever comments on that.
That's very interesting. I never thought of that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
But you're
it
right.
was-
That is a huge compliment. If he liked the footage so much to use it again twice.
Well, they're different shots.
Yeah.
There were more that he wanted to include, but it was like here was this continuity error, a massive continuity error that's a little bigger than a helicopter shadow.
Mhm.
And he was perfectly willing to accept that,
Yeah.
to put better shots in of the car going up and intercut with the family in the car. Just throw away all the footage that we shot for days and days of the car driving by with the trailer. Forget all that. Let's just put in some more helicopters.
So did you guys shoot the scene where he drives by the broken down red Volkswagen or the crashed one? Was that part of your ground shooting?
No, that was you're talking about Scatman's when he's
No,
coming
there was
up
like
in the snow.
I think it's when they're going up to I think it's when the family is going up to the overlook. There's like a scene where they pass by like an accident where there's like a red Volkswagen that's all messed up. I remember it was a big point of contention because it's one of these theories about Kubrick sticking it to Stephen King because the Volkswagen in the book is described as being red, and then they drive by the yellow one, drives by the broken down red one, and it's all part of this, like everyone thinking that it's some kind
it's
of
just this, it's all
it's a rabbit hole that's endless.
Yes, it has nothing to do with anything. No, when we were filming, I had negotiated the deal with the guy in the park, the head of the
oh wow, that must have been
park
interesting.
service. And so we were basically saying, look, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. And he would only allow us to film in the park under a couple of conditions. One, we could never land in the park, which meant that sometimes we'd have to hover, to come down real close to the ground so we could check the lenses to make sure there weren't bugs or dirt or whatever to make sure those were okay. But we did not land in the park. The other thing was we had to watch for traffic.
Oh yes.
Now this was we were sort of mirroring what was happening in the book, in that everything was shutting down because once it starts to snow in that park, nobody gets in or out. And so even the hotel we were staying in was shutting down, and they were, they're saying, look, we've got 3 items left on the menu because next Wednesday we're out of here.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the factor that was determining when we were done shooting. So it was the business about any cars. We were trying to find ways to avoid traffic that was in the park because we were unregulated. We didn't have, policemen on the ground with walkie-talkies to say, hey, we're ready to shoot again in that section of road. So like the famous scene where I come right up alongside the Volkswagen and we come around that cliff, there could have been cars coming because I couldn't see it. And we were just, that's what was in my mind at that moment was, please, nobody come around that corner. Because if they saw us, we were at the level of the Volkswagen.
Yeah.
If they had come around that corner, they would have run into us or they would have run off the road.
Yeah.
And if you look at the footage, there's not even a guardrail there. So typically what would happen is we would go up in the helicopter high enough that we could see like a couple of miles of road, and it would be like, okay, it looks like it's going to be clear. Then come back down, do a shot. So anyway, but the stuff about traffic on the road, it was whatever was there. It had nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Do you? And this is just a quick side note because I'm curious because I'm a big fan of it. The sequel, Dr. Sleep, they did that pays a lot of homages to the original. Did you watch?
Including 3 of my shots.
Including your shots. That's what I was going to say. What did you think of the homage shots of the cars?
That was wonderful. And it's funny because I've obviously gotten into a lot of, computer graphics
Mhm.
and computer animation and that sort of thing. And so when I saw that material, which is A, not in the daytime, it's now nighttime, and
Mhm.
B, it's snowing.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, they just recreated it. They just went into the computer and recreated the shots that I had done, but now they could control it, put snow on the ground
Mhm.
and all of that and make it night and whatever. And what I came to find out was no, they actually took my shots
Oh,
and
really?
converted them to make them look like night, and they added headlights and they added snow and all of that. They did that on, so those are actually my
Wow.
shots.
That's amazing. I had no idea. I
Yeah,
thought
I
I
just
thought it was just ingenious filming. I didn't realize that was they actually took. I'm a huge fan of that movie and that director actually. Everything he's done is gold to me. I haven't seen anything by him I haven't thoroughly loved. And his attention to detail and that stuff is amazing. That's so cool. Wow. That's
Well, it
amazing to
was
learn.
another surprise for me that I didn't know until I got in the theater to see it.
Wow.
Just like the extra shot, the extra helicopter shots. I found out about that when we were seeing the finished film at Warner Brothers at a screening, and it was like I was expecting, okay, here comes the trip, and we're going to see our ground shots, and it's like, oh my gosh, they're using more of the helicopter. It's great. So it's cool.
So after that, what was next? Like,
So
what did you
that
do?
was right after that was when I got the call to do this film in China
Okay.
for Epcot Center. And that was the first Circle Vision movie that I made, the 360 degree.
So you built a reputation at this point from being able to do aerial photography.
It was the aerials
Yeah.
of From the Shining that pretty much got me
Really?
that job.
Wow.
And then after I did the first one, which I wrote a book about the making of that film in China,
Mhm.
and because it was a very intense 2 years of work to make that film.
Really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah,
I didn't realize
yeah,
how much time was involved.
yeah.
Wow.
That was from the time that I first traveled to China until we opened the film in the park.
Wow.
And so that was an amazing adventure. The book is called Polishing the Dragons, and it's the making of Epcot's Wonders of China.
Wow.
And after that, I did a film, another Circle Vision film for Tokyo Disneyland. Then I did one for, I worked on America the Beautiful, or excuse me, the remake of America the Beautiful was called American Journeys. Then I did another one. I did Portraits of Canada for Expo 86. I did one for Euro Disneyland. And each of these Circle Vision films was a minimum of a 2-year project. And in fact, the one I did for Euro Disneyland was 2.5 years.
So does
That
Disney
was the
give
one.
you insight on what they're looking for specifically, just to give the feel for the country that you're doing this for, or is it left, mostly up to you as far as what you need to represent?
Well, like in the case of China, I had done a lot of research. This is pre-internet.
Mm.
So
Encyclopedias.
and this was at a time when China was coming out of the Cultural Revolution, and it was still quite rare to be able to get into China.
Right. Yeah, I never thought of that.
So it was very difficult, and so I was going to like Chinatown here in Los Angeles, and I'd buy up every book that I could find with pictures of great scenes and stuff like that. I bought every postcard in Chinatown, and I just started assembling these books, these big thick books that are like photo albums, so that when I went to China, I now had for our negotiations with the Chinese, I had all this material where I could say, okay, then I want to go to this province. And they go, well, why do you want to go there? And I go, okay, here, let me show you. And then I'd pull these things out. And I had done, a fair amount of research, but, I probably could do all the same amount of research in a week with Google, but, it took me months going
Wow.
to libraries and finding what I could. And I had presented to them about 150 locations, and they approved 72 of them. And so that was, shaped the movie out of that. And we were trying to show all 4 seasons, trying to show as many different regions of China as we could. And so but it was on me. And in my book, I talk about how strange it was that this came down to me. I mean, this is a film that was going to played at Epcot for 20 years.
Yeah.
It was seen by 100 million people. And their idea of China was what I was telling them. And it's like, who am I to tell anybody about what, it's like, it was my experiences of China were what I was using to then pass on to an audience.
I was going to ask if once being there and spending so much time there, that shaped and changed the shape of what you envisioned it would be based on, the things that you had seen, experienced, and maybe the places you've seen while there.
Yeah, it was a constant churn of ideas, of things that I wanted to include. And a lot of time, I got to travel the length and breadth of China for surveys.
Yeah.
To go to all of these places. Some places it would be a year before we were going to come back to film with a crew. And I would see things along the way, and not just necessarily at the location, but maybe on the travels, because we traveled by car, by train, by bus, by airplane, whatever, a boat. And I would see things along the way, and I'd make notes, and it would be like, I got to work this in somewhere, this little thing that I saw. And so the movie is full of these little moments and things that struck me. But as I was learning more and more about China, you learn the relative value of those things. And you go, because it's like I could see this as a Westerner, but I was also trying to be faithful to the Chinese view of what these things were. And so as I learned more, I was trying to balance those things. Yeah. So that was a challenge.
That's super interesting. I imagine China being your first one must have been such a, with the constraints given to you by the government and areas you can go to, like going to America or Canada or any of the places where you're probably wide open, must have been very freeing.
Yes,
to come and go as you please at that point.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, just one more very serious constraint that I had on me. I mean, there were some places in China where the placement of the camera, would be constrained by, a foot or two either way. In other words, if you put the camera here, you can't take the shot, but you move it over a couple of feet, and now you can take the shot because of what it would see or what it would depict. That they were that precise, they were that concerned about it. So
was there a representative with you at all times, making sure you're only getting what you're supposed to be getting?
Yes.
Oh, wow. What was your relationship like with that person?
Actually, we got along great eventually. Lao Tan was his name, Old Tan. He was supposed to be the Chinese production manager. I had an American production manager and a Chinese production manager. And the Chinese production manager was basically a guy that had been foisted on us. He was the spy. He was the guy who was going to report everything that we were doing. It was all going to go back to the government. And so, but we knew that. Yeah. And so I tried to, I made friends with him. When we would have banquets, I always honored him. I always found ways to make him feel part of the team, knowing full well he was a completely incompetent production manager, but he was the guy that I had to win over. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example of how we kind of won them over. When I had the first meeting with the Chinese and we talk about what you could do, what you can't do, one of the first things they said was nothing strategic. And it was like, okay, well, how are you defining that? What's strategic? At this time, China was still deathly afraid that the Russians were going to come over the border and attack them. And so they moved a lot of their bases and a lot of strategic targets into remote areas. Well, those remote areas were quite often the places where I wanted to film. And so it's like, well, you can't film that because there's a military base nearby. I mean, just the fact that we eventually got to the point where they could tell us.
I was going to say, I'm surprised they'd even tell you that much, because that seems
Well,
like too much
initially it was
information.
like, no, you just can't film there.
Hmm.
And we wouldn't know why. And then eventually we would come to find out, oh, okay, it's because there's a military base there. So they would say, you can't film strategic things. And I said, well, how do you define that? Like, what's strategic? And they go, bridges, trains,
Wow.
tunnels. And it's like, and I joked with them. This is like day one of my meetings with the Chinese. I said, well, that eliminates my shot that I wanted to do of a train coming out of a tunnel and going over a bridge. And
I'm sure they thought that was hilarious.
I was making a joke. You know, it was just I was trying to lighten the mood. There's a shot in the film of a train coming out of a tunnel going over a bridge, going into another tunnel.
That's amazing.
And it's because we eventually got to the point where they trusted us. They knew that what we were doing was trying to make China look its best. And we did, there were times when they said, well, you can't film in that province because there's too many army bases. And then we eventually ended up doing a shot on an army base. So, I mean, that just shows you eventually how we won them over, that we got to that point with.
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to look up this book. This sounds very interesting. I would definitely like to read it. Wow, that's crazy.
The reason I called it Polishing the Dragons was we literally did that. We were filming in Beijing. This was fairly early in the show. There is this wall in Beijing called the Nine Dragon Wall, and it's made of tiles. It's 3-dimensional, and it's this beautiful thing of 9 dragons on this wall. Very colorful, and it's quite old. And we had made arrangements to film there, and we got the cameras all set up. We're ready to go. I've got 50 extras standing by, ready to walk around through the background and everything. And I said, okay, but before we can film, we need to clean up the wall. And they went, what? And so I said, get me a bucket and and some mops and with some water. And we were out there cleaning, because these dragons are dimensional. So they had dust on them that they'd never been cleaned. They were filthy on top.
Wow.
And so we got out there with the mops, and it's just the American crew.
Yeah.
And we're out there mopping these things and cleaning them up and toweling them off and literally polishing the dragons. And I look over, and here's my Chinese crew, which has typically been, camera assistants and grips and so forth. And they're walking around the park and they're picking up, candy wrappers and cigarette butts. And we didn't tell them to do that, but it was like they got the message.
Yeah. They thought you made it look nice. Yeah. We're
going to make it look good. And so that was the basis of our relationship with them, is they understood from that moment on, we are here to make China look good.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, it's on Kindle. It's available on Kindle. If you've Kindle Unlimited, you can grab that for free.
Oh, you need to get the book, not the Kindle. I don't know what the Kindle is like, because there's a ton of pictures in the book.
Yes, I'm looking on. Amazon's what I'm looking at the moment. In the Canadian version, it doesn't look like there's a print copy I can find, but I will do some digging. It looks. I very much like to read it. It sounds very interesting. It's
the first and only book that I know of that's about the making of a theme park film for Disney.
And people like the themes. Those sort of films seem so disposable, in that when you just go to the park, you sit there and you watch them, and then you go about your day. Like, I've seen, my wife and I went to Florida for a honeymoon about 6 years ago, and went to Disney and saw the Canada Pavilion and all that sort of stuff. Whatever they got there now, those aren't the things you had done, but they you know, and it just seems like part of the experience, right? But
Yeah.
the scope, when you actually just stop and take it in, for the amount of work that goes into those things, it's amazing. And the idea that it was like years of your life and $9 million and the cruise and the travel, it's the kind of thing that I don't think enough people really stop and take in as to the level of work that goes into that sort of stuff. So I'm very interested to read a book that would take all that apart and show you every little facet of that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, because one of the things that I have done through my whole career is I've kept a daily diary.
That's a smart idea.
And what that meant was that I could go back to the time that I made that film and reconstruct every single day of the shoot. You know, not only the shoot, the pre-production, the meetings with the Chinese and everything of what we did, where we did it, who was there, that sort of thing. Very, very invaluable in putting together a book.
Wow. So how did you leverage that into or was it something that Disney had brought to you about doing because it seems like a lot of your work was almost documentarian in a way. I mean, with the aerial shots and stuff, it's not so much directing fiction or scenes, even in The Shining. But when you how did Cheetah come about, I guess, is my roundabout question.
I had always thought of myself as a live action, storyteller and had always wanted to do a feature film. And somewhere along the line of doing all those Circle Vision movies, I ended up, I had an agent and she got me a meeting. I had just finished doing a film for Disney for, Studio Tour, the MGM, what was called the MGM Studio Tour.
Hollywood Studios now, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well,
at the time, this was the early days with Eisner and Katzenberg at Disney. And I had been approached by a guy that I had done some film work for Disney before. And he said, we want to do a preview film of what's to come. We're going to be building this park. And we want to do a preview film. And I knew what that meant in Imagineering speak. And I said, "Oh, you want a hard hat film?" And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, it's like, here are the architects standing around in a field wearing hard hats, looking at the blueprints, pointing, and then here are the construction workers in hard hats as they're, bulldozing the land, and then here are the Imagineers in hard hats as they're, painting the last of it." And I said, "That's a hard hat film." And he went, "Yeah, that's pretty much it." And it was a low budget movie. I mean, they didn't have an awful lot of money for it. And I had been asked to design the preview center, which was where people would go in the park to see the film, but also to get the experience of what was to come. And I thought about this for a day or two, and I just said, this is a horrible representation of what Hollywood is supposed to be like,
Guys that hard hats pointing stuff. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, but they had done that since the earliest days of Disney. I mean, Wonderful World of Disney. Here's Walt himself telling you, "Let's go take a look at what they're doing down at in Anaheim," and it would be guys in hard hats pointing and stuff.
Thanks, Walt.
Yeah. So I came back to them and said, "I have a different idea." And they said, "Well, what's that?" And I said, one of the big things that they're going to build at the park is the front of Grauman's Chinese Theater. Right? They're going to build a replica of Grauman's Chinese Theater. And I said, why would we wait to film Grauman's Chinese Theater in Florida, while it's being built, when it's sitting in Hollywood right now? And they went, "Oh, yeah, I see what you mean." And I said, why would we wait until they're going to put up sound stages when we have sound stages here in Hollywood?
Mhm.
And I said, why don't we find a way to make the movie before we make the movie in Florida?
Yeah.
And so my idea was a kind of a fantasy of a typical family lost in the movies.
Ah.
And it's like you go through a door and you're suddenly in the movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The kid goes through another door and he's in Star Wars or whatever. That so that it was this fantastic thing that just reveled in the movies. So they said, well, that's not going to be the price of a hard hat movie, is it? And I said, no, it is not. So they said, well, you've got to pitch it to, Michael Eisner and Katzenberg and Frank Wells.
To the top.
So I went. They said, you're going to have to go to Florida to do this because they have this marathon session that they do where people come in and you get like 5 minutes. And the room is full of executives and they're all basically geared up to say no. Yeah. And so I went in and just threw myself at them and just waved my arms around and kept, just talking about the movies and all the things that could be in it. And I remember Eisner said, well, how much is this going to cost? And I knew he was going to ask that. And I had done a literal budget on the back of an envelope. And I figured $1.5 million I could do this. And don't know why I picked that number. Anyway, I went in and I said, well, it's going to be expensive, but I think it'll be just really memorable and really get the park off to a good start, but $1.5 million. And he said, well, if you can do it for half that, you got to go. You got a green light. And it was like, okay. But it was like half the budget. Why didn't I double it before I told him?
Yeah.
$3 million.
$3 million, yeah.
Because he was getting to be the king. He gets to go, take off half of his head. Just, do it for less. And so we did it for $750,000. And it was a great success. And I was screening that movie at Disney, and a Disney executive came into the screening room and said, "You're Jeff, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he said, "Come see me when the film is over." And his office was right around the corner. This is up on the 3rd floor, up near Walt's old office. And I went, okay, I don't know what that's about. But so I walk into this guy's office. He had just come from lunch with my agent. And they were looking for a director for this film in Africa. And the fact that I had, been in the Peace Corps in Africa, that, I'd made a documentary there. I'd written screenplays about, the area. It was like I was the guy they were looking for because they knew I was going to have to. It was a low budget film. And they wanted someone who could think on their feet, meaning you're going to get all kinds of obstacles come up, changes where it's like you're going to just have, you're not going to be able to call the studio and we're going to have meetings about it and discuss how you didn't get that location, but you've got this other location. It was just, you need to go do that. And so that was how I ended up with Cheetah.
Wow. In that experience, what was working with the cheetah on a regular like that? As a cat lover myself, even big cats aren't the easiest things to train. You saw one wander in here earlier. I have 3 of them. I have 3 of them in the house. We had 4. One just passed away not too long ago, but I can't imagine they're the most agreeable animals to have do what you want them to do.
Well, we had 2 cheetahs, a male and a female. The female would do all the running and all the motion type stuff. The male was really good for sitting around looking good. It was good for sitting.
Did you have to, because I did background one time on one of those Beethoven movies, the dog, it was like the 7th one or something. They filmed it here in Nova Scotia. And I remember watching them because they had to paint the markings on the dogs so they would match. Did they have to do that with the cheetahs as well?
No.
No, they look close enough.
They look close enough that they just, we'd interchange them. So
That's
if you
awesome.
saw the cat in motion, it was the female, and if it was just sitting there looking good, that was the male.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I noticed too, it's funny thing about that particular film is the use of the term Hakuna Matata. You guys got ahead of Lion King by a few years with that one, because that became such a huge thing later, and it was used fairly frequently in the movie, and not like it was really drawn attention to, but the idea of what it means and the phrases used.
Right. Well, it's Swahili, and that's the language of the country. So, I can't take any credit for that. It was
no, I know
there long before I got there.
And that, and I found it interesting doing research for it about how Disney had put another movie called Duma out in like 2005 or something, which is also about this is slightly
It's
different
just the
story.
Swahili. It's just the
For
Swahili.
Cheetah, yeah.
Cheetah.
I was like, well, obviously they stole the name of this cheetah, or not stole because it's their own movie. But I looked at it and I was like, oh, it means cheetah in Swahili, so that makes perfect sense. Yeah. But it's a lighthearted, fun little movie. With a lot of I feel like, and as someone who doesn't have a great frame of reference for like deep African culture or any of that sort of stuff, just what I've seen in film or in any media I've seen, it seems very sensitive towards the area itself and to the people and to nature and to all that sort of stuff, and I really enjoyed that. I mean, obviously as an animal lover myself, the attention brought to those themes I thought was very important, and probably not something that was highlighted in like I guess a children's film of sorts. I wouldn't call it a children's film, but like a film that seemed to be with like skinning cheetahs for pelts and that sort of thing isn't something that's probably at that time period would have been deeply explored in those sort of films. So I kind of appreciated the use of your platform to get that message across to hopefully a younger generation.
Well, that was it was like the thing we were talking about before. I can't turn that off. That's just me, and so I gravitate to that sort of thing. And excuse me, just getting over a cold.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that when you have a choice, where somebody, the art department comes to you and says, well, we could do this or we could do that. What do you think? And it's like, well, what's the real thing? How do they normally do this? How do the local people do this? And it just seemed to me to make sense to just go that direction and make that work rather than make something up or use what Hollywood always uses. And that to me is like a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, actually. It's funny because I was trying to do a scope of your work from what I could and seeing your newest film, and I was like, well, this seems to be one of as a feature film that you directed, I wanted to watch it. So it's so fresh in my mind because I just finished it earlier today, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I feel as though maybe as a kid watching Wonderful World of Disney, I may have caught it at some point. So it seems very familiar. But yeah, I know the boy from it I recognize from the Adventures in Babysitting. I watched that movie a lot as a kid. But Keith Coogan. But it was super good. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and that of course led into some TV work with Alex Mack and a few other things. Before I don't want to keep you all night. I mean, we've already been here for an hour, so I'll let you go. I just wanted to ask you about your one of your newer shorts. So what spirituality got to do with it? I was trying to do a little research on what that was about, but the title kind of grabbed me, so I was interested in what that was about.
After I did my time with Disney, I looked for a lot of different other kinds of projects to keep me busy. And typically you look for clients that are interested in a film that needed to be made. And I had this local hospital call me up, and they said, we've heard about you. You've done a lot of films for the school district and things like that. So I was getting a name here locally in the city. And they said, we'd like to hire you to tell us if this budget that somebody is proposing for a film is any good or not. I was like, okay.
Consulting.
Yeah, consulting on a budget. And so it was a dreadful film. They hadn't shot it yet, but I read the script, I saw the budget, and I was looking at it, and I just thought, I hate to be the guy who says, that sucks, but I can do a better one. But it was like the hard hat film. It was like there's so much more you could be doing than what you're doing. And so I explained myself to them, and as opposed to just simply saying, yeah, that budget works or it doesn't work. I said, hey, there's some other thoughts about this kind of project. Can I explore those with you? And they said, oh yeah, absolutely, sure. So we sat down and I came up with a new concept for them, and that's where that film came from. Now, Glendale Adventist Hospital, they're a religious organization, institution. So for them, it wasn't just a hospital film. It's like, how does spirituality come into this? I mean, they're not overtly religious. They don't proselytize their hospital patients or anything like that. But they are very much aware of how you have spiritual needs in addition to physical and emotional needs and that sort of thing. And so that was the origin of that particular project. But what we did was all scripted with actors, filmed on location at the hospital. But it was a little dramatic film. Yeah, but that was, and I ended up doing 4 or 5 different films for that hospital.
Oh wow, so good business anyway. Is spirituality something that's in your life, or is it something that you just you wanted to?
It was something that's in their life, and that was what they were looking for, and that was what I'm not a I don't think of myself as a spiritual person, but I think of myself as somebody who is at least open to other people's spirituality and their needs and that sort of thing.
I kind of see myself the same way, which is probably why the title grabbed me, because I was curious about the exploration of that sort of theme. I don't necessarily believe in anything specific, but I am sensitive to other people's, level of that. And there's a certain solidarity that comes, or not solidarity, comfort that comes with spirituality. I feel like that I wish I could attain. So I'm happy others have it, and I respect it. I just, for some reason, I can't. It doesn't work for me. Not yet, anyway. Maybe someday. But anything on the get-go? I know you mentioned this new project you have out, which is called sorry, I want to make sure I get this title correct.
The new one,
the newest one you have. Nothing has been forgotten. I knew it has not been forgotten. So Nothing has been forgotten, which is on YouTube, and I will share that on our social media as well. It's a great little documentary. I really enjoyed it. And Cheetah, you want a fun family film, it's definitely one for you. So and check out any of your work as well as his book. I'm definitely going to be going to look for that. So anything else on the
on my if anybody looks me up on YouTube, they will find a number of little projects that are things that I do to fill in the gaps the way I did when I was in high school and in college and ever since. And that is, little projects will come along that an idea for something, and I'll, make a little film about it. And there are a whole series of films that I did with Wally.
I just, it's funny. I just went to go subscribe to your YouTube channel, and I've just noticed that.
Yeah. I even did a crossover of Wally at the Overlook Hotel.
I see that one. There's a Wally versus Trump, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, there's one of the latest ones is the one called Here's Wally. Yeah. And it's as if he was, instead of Danny running down the across the carpet on his little big wheel, it's Wally. And being chased by Jack Nicholson through the maze.
That's amazing. It actually brought two things up to me I want to ask you real quickly, because I do want to let you go. So The Timekeeper, which you'd done as well, which is a short film for Disney. Right. Did you have any input in that as far as with Robin Williams and stuff? Was that because he did the voice for that, correct? Right. Yeah. Did you have a relationship with him at all, or?
Well, I was the director of the film, so yeah.
Okay, I suppose
it was. He was a force of nature.
Yeah.
I spent, a full day with him, which was like a lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, he never stopped,
Yeah.
morning till night.
He seemed like a magical kind of person.
He was, and there's one real quick story.
Mhm.
He was going to narrate, be the voice of this robot timekeeper,
Yep.
and a lot of what he was doing was supposed to be reactive to what he sees on the screens, which is what Nine Eye, the little character that he sends through time, she would get into trouble, and he would see, and he would react. And I had told the people I worked with there at Imagineering, I said, we have to capture this. We got to get his first reactions to this stuff. And they said, yeah, we can't really do that. We've set up a screening for him. We're going to show him the footage that we've got, because we had a rough cut of the whole film at that point. And I said, no, you really need to record this. And they went, the projectors are going to be making noise, and they're going to be people around, and I said, number one, when you're in the theater, you've got 9 projectors running.
Yeah.
So there's already that sound that's there. You can't avoid it. Number two, the theater is full of people. So if there are people, chuckling in the background, how is that different from the people that are in the theater chuckling in the foreground?
Yeah, exactly.
So I said, we need to record this. And so they kept dragging their feet, and I finally insisted. So the day comes, we're going to show the film to Robin Williams, and we're going to get, and they bring out this lavalier microphone that dated from the 1960s. I mean, this was like a microphone that we would have used, in the black and white television days, these old fashioned lavalier microphones with a long cable. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, there you go. You got your microphone.
Oh,
and so we played the film, and he just went wild. He did his typical Robin Williams thing, and he had all these wonderful reactions. Well, we were planning anyway to follow up the screening with bringing him into a studio where we could show him just one screen of the footage and record clean audio.
Yep.
Which we did.
Yeah.
And the Imagineers kept saying, we need the good, clean, solid sound from the studio. Well, we ended up, by the time we were done, we ended up using almost half of his stuff from that initial screening.
Yeah, because there's a magic.
Because it just isn't the same.
No.
When you have lunch and come back and go into a studio, and now you've got it's all very formal, and he's seen it before.
Yeah.
It's slightly different. So we captured some of that magic, but had to struggle to get it.
Wow, that's amazing. And that, just glancing at the cast list for that film, it's amazing. You had like Django, the original Django, Franco Nero in there, Jeremy Irons, like Gerard Depardieu. That's Rhea Perlman. Like, that's super cool.
That was a big one.
And my final question, I guess, before I let you go, is I noticed in one of your bios that it mentioned you worked on Blade Runner. I was just curious what your involvement with that was.
Well, I don't know who put it quite that way. I never claimed to work on Blade Runner, but some of my footage that I shot for The Shining is in Blade Runner.
Oh,
the original cut of the film, the very first theatrical cut, because I think there's about 4 different cuts of the film now.
Oh yeah, there's like a bunch, but yeah, 4 mostly.
But the very first cut that they did of the film, they didn't have an ending, or they had a weak ending, and the studio said, you got to come up with something better. And so Ridley Scott was trying to come up with something, and he for some reason he was talking to Kubrick about it, and Kubrick said, oh, I got some great footage that was shot at Glacier National Park. And when I was filming those scenes, my direction was to film the Volkswagen. But quite often the Volkswagen would have to turn around and go back and get gas or whatever, or the weather wasn't exactly right. And so I would go off with the pilot, and we would just shoot some pretty pictures, just sort of flying through the mountains. Just sort of stock footage, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of that, I mean, a good chunk of that is the ending, including the end credits of the original Blade Runner.
Wow.
So just
That's very interesting. Wow. Okay, that's super cool. Because I remember thinking about it when I was looking at your credits, and there's no real mention. I just saw it in one of some bio somewhere, and I remember thinking, wow, like the Shining and Blade Runner. That's but they're both. It's all through the same. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh well. Thank you so much, Jeff. This has been a real pleasure and an honor. I'm a big fan of many of the things you've been involved with, and it's been great talking with you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I wish you all the success with your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'll definitely be posting a lot of things about things you talked about here, so any fans of the show can have access to that, and I hope they do so because it looks amazing. So
Send me the links.
I will do. Thank you so much, Jeff. Talk to you soon.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
There it is, my discussion with Jeff Blyth. What a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it. Jeff was awesome to talk to, very open, very engaging, and told some amazing stories. I was floored by some of that stuff about his work in China, and also, obviously Blade Runner being connected to, inadvertently connected to The Shining, which is something I had no idea about. So that was very interesting and very exciting to learn as well. Yeah, this is our last episode before, not before the new year, hopefully. We do have a guest coming up, hopefully. I got to discuss with them and coordinate and get that recorded in time. But hopefully our next episode will be airing at the usual time, which will be December 30th, just before the new year. So I will save my New Year's greeting till then. But before that, we do have Christmas. And whatever holiday you celebrate, I hope it's a good one. I hope it's a happy one. I hope it's spent with friends and family, and you get some good cheer in and some good time with your loved ones. And if you do celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. And I hope you, all those things for you and yours during the holiday season. So this is your host, Andre Mayed, wishing you happy holidays, Merry Christmas. And I'll see you just before the new year.